My question for you today is, have you exercised your free will? So in a bit of exercising my free will, my ability to do anything I want within reason, I'm doing this video like this. And I'm gonna talk a bit about free will and the nature of things. The nature of something, including yourself, and how free will is an expression, I guess, of how you really are, I suppose, if you let yourself lean into it, fit into it. So the idea of free will, I think, struck me most viscerally in this video I saw of a lady washing strawberries and her just suddenly thinking, I'm an adult now, these are strawberries that I bought with my own money, I can just squeeze them into pulp if I want. And she had a thought and she did it, and that look of joy on her face when she did it, I don't think I can find that video anymore. I came across it randomly, probably on Instagram at one point, but that feeling of I guess just that pure I can't remember how to pronounce the word, but that pure joy, unbridled joy, is something. Also, I should say, right now as I'm filming this, there's like this person in one of the blocks that's overlooking this area. Like, I can see them. I don't know what they're looking at, but anyway. So they exercise their own free will, and that video has left an impression on me, even though I don't remember who did it. And I think the reason is that is that moment of, like, you know, when you're a child and you just want to do something for the sake of doing it, and then you do it, you know. And I think as adults we sometimes lose that. We lose that pure and raw expression of who we really are. And in a way it's kind of sad, right? Because actually as an adult you have a lot more resources and means to do what you really want that you probably didn't get to as a kid. And I'm just gonna say, like this got me thinking about a few different things, right? So a few things culminated in this video. One was that strawberry thing that I mentioned. The other one is recently I've been looking through some of the old works that I've done, and by that I mean like some old, like 13 years ago photos that I've taken of my dolls, my hobby, some fan fiction that I wrote about 9 years ago. And it's interesting to look back at what I've created with new eyes or with old eyes, because I think the thing with art and with creation and with anything that requires work, right, is that it means that you have spent some time, some effort, some care into putting that thing into the final form of whatever art it is that you've made. And for me, in making those photos, in choosing to do certain things, in choosing to write about certain things in certain stories, I have poured a little bit of myself by virtue of the fact that I've chosen to, you know, dedicate my time and my effort into doing that thing. And so just by selection bias, any form of art or creation that I've done or made is inherently imbued with a sense of who I am, because it's something that for some reason I've decided on a subconscious level that it's worth spending my time and energy and effort on. And it's funny to now look back at what past me did years and years ago, right? And be like, looking at it with fresh eyes, because I've forgotten what I've written about or forgotten what I've taken photos of. Like, sometimes you just, you just forget. And like, to look at physical evidence of what I was thinking about, right? Like, it's kind of like low resolution time traveling. And by that I mean, like, I sort of travel back in time to meet who I was back in those days. But at the same time, it's a low res version of who I was, because it's kind of like the nitpicked, chosen, nice bits of whatever, or like, not nice, but maybe impactful or influential bits of whatever it was about my life that I decided was worth spending time putting into words, putting into photos. And so I left those look backs with a feeling of immense gratitude that I have always been an artist, and that I have all these records of myself to look at and look back on and reflect and observe. And it's funny because I think I don't take being an artist as something particularly special until I realize and remember that not everyone is like this. Not everyone sits down and feels this itch to create and pour their time and effort out into something, and it's as if you don't create something, that sometimes you just can't sit still. So it's weird for me, because I think it has always been such an inherent part of my life that to me it's, mundane, common. But I'm aware now that it's not a common experience necessarily. And anyway, for that I am grateful because of everything my art has brought me. But back to what I realized. So what I realized was that I've thought about certain topics and issues in the past, and they are somewhat similar to the stuff that I've still been thinking about, I still am thinking about. And it's funny because sometimes you look back and you would think like, well, I would like to think that I have been moving forward, growing in a positive direction on a whole. And I guess on a whole is the key word here, because sure, I've been going in a positive direction and maturing on a whole, but sometimes, there are little bits of extra upticks in the growth that you kind of regress and forget about. So it was quite funny to go back to like my old stories and see that so in that particular story, there was a person who was a photographer, and he came up with this final year art exhibition called Free to Be, then in close brackets, Limitless. And basically he takes a bunch of photos, portrait photos of people who, in his opinion, defied certain stereotypes of their gender, of their presentation, things like that. And it's funny because like when I was reading this part of the story, I was like, yeah, of course I was thinking about all of this back in what would be my uni days back then, right? Because I think gender and sexuality and, all this identity, queer identity, were a big part of what I was thinking about during that time. So of course I was like reading this, I was like, yeah, of course I thought about all this. But then when it got down to the end of the story, there was a part where another character, not the main character who's the photographer, another character actually gave a critique on this exhibition, this final year photo project in the story. And his critique was that if for an exhibition that is meant to be free to be limitless, it should have included examples where people actually followed or fell into the stereotype and not just defied the stereotype. Because if the only way you can be limitless is to defy stereotypes, like if that was the only way to be limitless, right, is to be actively defying a stereotype, then that is a very limited way to be limitless. And that is like me reading this at like 2 a.m. Being like, wow, I forgot I thought about that. It's like this is what I mean by sometimes I grow a bit more in certain periods of my life and then I regress a bit and I forget that I've thought about all these things before. So it's quite nice that my art has reminded me of this. So what does this have to do with free will, you might wonder? I think free will is inherently a choice that we make, right? And free will is a choice that you have all the time, anytime. As long as you're here, you have free will. And that is a layer that kind of goes above what I would call the nature of things. So, the nature of things, I guess, for today's discussion, for today's context, is really just an inherent property that a thing has. Like it's just innate. It's just an innate property. Like it's just a part of what it is. Like the fact that the ground beneath me is hard. Like the fact that I am a certain height. Like the fact that I'm ethnically Chinese. Like it's an inherent property of a thing. And like paper has grain. Grain of any material is an inherent property of the material, right? Like I had this thought when I was doing an exercise from a book by Hank Green. Anyway, the exercise basically asks you to tear a piece of paper within that book. And as I was tearing the paper into the tiniest bits that I could, which is what the instructions said and which I wanted to follow, I came to realize that even when the paper was torn to such small bits that I couldn't tell which direction was, because the paper is rectangular, right? So there is a long side and a short side. Even though at some point I've torn the paper until like the small bit, I can't really tell by like words or letterings which orientation it was on that page. I could tell by how the paper tore whether, like, I could figure out in reverse by how the paper tore to put the paper back into the correct orientation, because the paper tore more easily on the short side than it did on the long side. If you try to tear it along the long side, it comes out in this weird jaggedy, like it doesn't want to tear. And then if you tear it along the other way, it kind of comes out in like somewhat neat parallel strips. And that is grain, right? That is the grain of the paper that you don't necessarily see, but it is an inherent property that you find out if you try to tear the paper, try to destroy it, try to interact with it. Maybe destroy is a bit of a strong word, just interact with it. So I also had a similar thought just now when I was having my lunch. I was cutting into a stick, and in a certain direction it was much easier to cut, which is along the grain. And then in the other direction, or any other direction really, it's kind of a pain to cut because it's against the grain. And you get all these small little muscle fiber bits that drop out, and then you just have like little bits of stick shavings that you have to pick up with your fork, which is a pain. Okay, anyway, I'm really talkative today for some reason. So there is that nature of things, right? And like, I'm not saying that you can't go against the nature of the grain. You can cut the stick the wrong way. I mean, not the wrong way. You can cut the stick against the grain. You can tear the paper against the grain. It just doesn't want to tear. And wanting to tear nicely in a certain direction is as much of a property as not wanting to tear nicely in another direction. You get what I mean? Like, it's not like one is positive or negative. It's just an inherent state of being. So like, just like how being along the grain, going along the grain is not necessarily better or worse than going against the grain. It's just that, the inherent property of going along the grain is that things will go more smoothly, and if you go against the grain, it will go more with more friction and more resistant. And why free will is important is because you have a choice. You always have a choice to choose whether you want to go with the grain or against the grain, and that is entirely fully your choice. But before you do that, I would like to ask you to consider, like, as you exercise this free will and you find out, what is going along the grain and what is going against the grain for you, what are you like? What are you like as a person? What is the nature of you? And I think bringing it back to me, right? Because I don't know, sometimes I don't want to like make you, the person watching this video, feel too pressured that I'm like targeting you. Like I'm not. I just sometimes when I say you I mean me, and sometimes when I say me I mean me. But like, let's just put the focus on me so that the spotlight is off of you. But feel free to hear any of this reference to me as reference to you, as you see fit. Exercise your free will. But like, when I think about free will as applied on myself, right, and the nature of who I am. So like I said, one thing is that I'm an artist, and that is an inherent state of who I am. Like, I will always work and I will always create, and it's just something that can't stop. And it's not a good or necessarily bad thing. There are periods in my life where I created much less, like in much less prolific terms than other periods, and like, those were all pieces of the puzzle for me to figure out that sometimes they were all pieces of puzzles for me to figure out that going along the grain for me would be to create, and going against the grain for me would be to not create. Which is not to say that I cannot not create, but it is just not as easy to do. There's a lot more friction, there's a lot more resistance, there are a lot of blockages in place for me to get to a point where I'm that way. And that my natural, comfortable state of being, of flow, is to create. So that's one thing, right? And I think another thing that really sort of solidified this like nature of being thing is like, for the last few days when I was going through the whole like looking through my old art thing, and like, gosh, it's raining right now. And yeah, basically the song Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus kept playing in my head, and I only came across this song as an adult. I've never actually listened to it when I was a kid, but for some reason it spoke a lot to how I felt as a kid. Maybe as a kid is a bit inaccurate. I would say maybe as a teen, right? And like, the feeling of not necessarily the song lyrics, but I guess a bit like in the song lyrics, he's kind of an outcast. But just like the general kind of grungy pop punk vibes of that era really brought me back, and sort of brought me back to my roots. I mean, the reason why I wanted to film this video like this is sort of to show you what I'm wearing. This is quite funny actually. This pair of pants came back to me because this was what I liked to wear when I was like, what, 13, 14? I wore jeans from the men's section, and then they were really baggy. They are relatively baggy, I guess. And then for a while I was like, that's cool. And then when I got a bit older, I was like, that's not cool anymore, because trends have changed, and then skinny jeans were in. So I gave this to my brother because I also figured that like, it's time to grow up, stop buying stuff from the men's section, buy stuff from the women's section like I'm supposed to. And I tried that for a while, buying stuff from only the women's section. And there's nothing wrong with buying from the women's section, like, that's not the point of what I'm trying to say. But I think the thing that like, anyway, the reason why the pants came back to me is because my brother decided that he no longer wants them. So I found it before it got thrown out of the house. And I cannot explain the explicit rightness, the right feeling of rightness and joy when I saw this pair of pants again. Like, I was worried that before I put it on today that it would only look right but not feel right the moment it's back on me. And the moment I put it on, it was just like, it's like no time has changed at all. I feel right in this the same way I felt right in it back when I was like 14. And like, it's not even really a matter of like what it looks like. Like I can look at this video later and see what I look like in these pants and how I'm moving in them. But like, the point isn't so much of what it looks like on the outside, but how it feels to me on the inside, right? And like, it brought to my attention that actually this pants or even this Converse, which are also, born of the same era, things that I wanted back then, that whole pop punk, Avril Lavigne vibe, is very interesting because even before I knew the words to express it, my true nature, my inherent nature of being, right, has been trying to express itself outward into this world in ways that I just couldn't fully explain, because it was still subconscious, I suppose, at that point in time. And now I'm a bit more conscious about it, and therefore I can sort of put it into words, right, and see that, like, maybe this is sort of an inherent expression of the kind of vibe that I would like to be. But it's interesting to me because of all this whole like looking back and looking forward to now, to see that even through time, even through things that have changed, I have had an inherent nature and way of being that always feels right to me. And it's kind of amazing, right? To really like sit down and discover that about yourself. I think tangentially, like, a lot of times we look to other people, usually romantic, to fulfill that seeing into us. But have you considered that you can really do that seeing yourself? You can really be the one to look deeply into yourself and see who you are fully in your true nature, with love and with acceptance, and with joy, and with kindness and compassion. I think I said love already. And it's just, yeah, like, isn't it amazing that we get to be alive and that we get to have free will to do what we want within reason, without harming other people. But like, I mean, that aside, and isn't it interesting that, as with, I want to say everything, but I figured like at least most things would be accurate enough. Most things in this world, or almost everything that I know about physically, maybe even non-physically, but have a certain inherent nature to them, an inherent way of being, an inherent property, innate property of how the thing is, how you are, how I am. And to have that free will, that freedom to choose to express it as along the grain or against the grain. And not just that, but to have the ability to sit and deeply see and observe that particular nature of yourself and of other beings and of other things, physical objects. It's just like, it really puts into perspective how vast and wondrous life is. And I think I'm just gonna end it off here today. Think about it. Think about something that you would like to exercise free will on. And who knows, maybe you want to squish some strawberries and lick the juice off your hands. Why not? Why not? Alright, that's all for this video. It's Kian from option C. See you next time.